Part 91. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Enchenmi San. Chapter 936. No, Zwilligito shook his head. I didn't notice anything unusual. Where's Cortana? Hound asked again. Me neither. Valentina's voice came through the inner shell of the deep submersible. I don't think it can be that simple. If we could find out the pattern of such abnormal events so easily, we wouldn't be in this situation. Chi Hanfan sighed. Among the various theories about the ruins of the Alpha civilization, do you know something called the illusion magnetic field? Ghost Owl suddenly asked. I've heard of it, but I don't know much about it, Hound said. I'm not interested in this theory, which is basically all hypothetical. I value skills that can actually play a role in the ruins. But our current situation just fits the description of the phantom magnetic field, Ghost Owl said. What is the fantasy magnetic field? Can you explain it in detail? Chi Hanfan, who knew almost nothing about the ruins, asked curiously. Many hunters will have hallucinations and auditory hallucinations after entering the ruins, and even the whole person will fall into an illusion and be unable to extricate themselves. You must have heard of this, right? Chi Hanfan nodded. According to the information collected by experts who study ruins, most of the illusions seen by hunters in the same type of ruins are relatively similar, and some people may even have the same illusion. So experts believe that this illusion is actually a kind of illusion similar to player. It's like a device. Each ruin has those images and sounds pre-stored, and the brain of the hunter who enters the ruins is like a box of magnetized videotapes. These images and sounds will be copied directly into it. I think, the 776 Special Forces team back then, and the first group of people who explored the underwater city must have received similar revelation, so they left behind those puzzling clues. Furthermore, Ghost Owl continued, there is another very significant characteristic of the fantasy magnetic field, that is, the longer you stay in the ruins and the deeper you explore, the more information is recorded into your brain. I know that. Hound nodded in agreement. Those ruins that tend to make people go crazy generally have strict exploration time limits. No matter what the harvest is or what discoveries are made, you can't stay in the ruins for more than this time limit, otherwise it will be easy to fall into hallucinations. Once trapped in hallucinations, it will be difficult to get out of the ruins smoothly, and the hallucinations will become deeper and deeper, turning into a vicious circle. Even if he is later rescued by the rescue team, this person will also completely become a madman or a fool. Then how do you explore a ruin like this? Chi Hanfan asked. If a large ruin has a fantasy magnetic field, and the stay time limit is 30 minutes, then these 30 minutes will not even be enough to reach the depths of the ruin. Then are you going to give up on this ruins? There are always more ways than difficulties. When encountering such ruins, there are usually two ways to deal with them. Hound raised two fingers. The first is to use robots to explore. In fact, most of the ruins are the most dangerous. Preliminary exploration work is done by robots, and only those ruins with complex environments or strong interference will be allowed to be visited by hunters. The second method is more unscrupulous, and is usually done by unscrupulous hunting groups affiliated with large consortiums. Recruit a large number of rookie hunters with dreams of getting rich, and then use their lives to fill the gap. Throw 100 or so people in, and there will always be a lucky person who can crawl out holding the treasure deep in the ruins. As the Hound spoke, he glanced at the Ghost Owl involuntarily. Our hunting group has never bothered to do this kind of thing. Sensing the look in the Hound's eyes, Ghost Owl immediately retorted, our hunting group has always attached great importance to the cultivation of fresh blood, so we will not let newcomers do such a life-threatening job. But the vast majority of hunting groups acquired by consortiums do this. I don't know whether it's because the KPI requirements within the consortium are too high, or because the people responsible for managing the hunting groups are short-sighted. Most of those hunting groups hope to make quick money, fishing in the lake, taking the lives of newcomers not seriously, all kinds of destructive excavation and other things, basically all come from those hunting groups. If an exploration Mission requires cooperation with such hunting groups, I would rather pay liquidated damages. Give up the mission. Then what should we do now? Continue to explore the underwater city, Chi Hanfan asked worriedly. If there really is a phantom magnetic field here, if we continue to explore, the situation will only get worse. Bar. That's not necessarily true, everything has two sides. Ghost Owl shook his finger. If the illusion completely swallows up consciousness, that is certainly a bad thing, but if we can ensure that we can maintain a clear self-awareness while accepting the information from the illusion, then this information can be of great use in the exploration of ruins. Those famous hunters in history are all people with extremely high inspiration and firm minds. They can make good use of these illusions, and in turn come and use it in your exploration work. Except for Chi Hanfan, an outsider, both Hound and Zwilligito know this, and Kaylan also knows it. Once, Kaylan also believed like Ghost Owl that as long as he has both high inspiration and high inspiration at the same time, with the two characteristics of firm mind, he can gain a great advantage in exploring the ruins, but since he learned about erosion and super-erosion, his views have changed dramatically. The so-called inspiration is actually those taboo knowledge that can continuously deepen the degree of erosion of the human body. Of course, the more taboo knowledge you master, the more information you can obtain, but once the degree of erosion exceeds the critical point, the entire person will turn into a corpse, turning into a half-human, half-corpse monster, but not everyone can turn into a corpse. For example, those with fragile minds, the degree of physical erosion has not approached the critical point, and the spirit has already been destroyed. A complete breakdown, in the eyes of others, this situation appears as a mental illness such as madness or dementia. The 33 in front of him had obviously fallen into madness. 33, who was indulging in the illusion, somehow remembered the way to manipulate nano-alloy, although the technology was extremely unskilled. Those black flying blades that flew crookedly but had extremely tricky attack angles were still very useful to him. Kaylan poses a great threat. Ian's body has been cut with hundreds of cuts, and the most serious injury is located directly in front of the chest. The first black flying blade cuts through the flesh, the second black flying blade cuts off the ribs, and the third black flying blade cuts off the ribs. The black flying blade goes straight into the heart. If it weren't for Ian's almost abnormal recovery ability, he would have been killed countless times by 33. The only thing Kaylan can do now is to protect his head as much as possible, drag 33 while fighting and retreat, and during the fight, try his best to grab those black flying blades and throw them to 33. Outside San's control range, it's just that the number of black flying blades that Lugo forged for 33 was actually quite a lot. Kaylan has already lost nearly 100 of them, and 33's offensive is still continuous. Kaylan has basically given up on protecting other parts except his joints and brain. His body seems to have endured the ancient torture called Ling Chi. Although the wounds on his skin and flesh have healed, his clothes have. It was cut like a broken fishing net, and it was soaked with the blood that flowed from the wound. The edge of the black-red dyed cloth was dripping with semi-solidified blood drops. 33. Wake up quickly. Everything you see now is fake. I am not your enemy, Kaylan shouted to 33. He was sure that 33 could see when I arrived, I just didn't know if he could hear my voice. It's useless. Nieto's voice came from all directions. He can see you and hear your voice, but in his mind, you are now a terrifying monster. The cry is as creepy as an indescribable whisper. Do you think he would stop attacking in the face of such a thing? What kind of dream did you implant in him? Kaylan asked Nieto during the break. Fear is of no use to you, but for most humans, fear is the best catalyst for madness, Nieto said lightly. What I let him see is what he fears most. As for this thing, only he himself knows what it is. The most fearful thing. Actually, you can kill him. Although his ability is a bit troublesome, it shouldn't be difficult for you to kill him. Why haven't you done it yet? Nieto asked jokingly. Get the hell out of here, Kaylan cursed. He knew that it was pointless to argue with Nieto about this kind of thing. The other party's purpose was to make the two of them look up at the dome above. As long as he refused, "If you do, Nieto will not stop." Kaylan thought about knocking Sansan unconscious, but he took the opportunity to go behind Sansan and hit him hard on the head. The opponent only stiffened for a moment, then turned around and continued to attack. For this reason, Kaylan also paid the price of a half-hand cut on his abdomen. 33, who was trapped in a dream, seemed to be completely immune to the dizziness. Even if Kaylan crushed 33's skull, he would probably be beaten to death. He couldn't knock him out. 33 can only rely on himself if he wants to escape from the dream. At this moment, 33's perspective. This is a barren land. All that could be seen was cracked earth and gray-yellow sand and gravel. Not even a dry weed or a piece of moss growing on the shady side of the stone could be seen. There was absolutely no sign of life in this place. There are no traces of small insects in the cracks of the hardened and cracked soil. There are many barren lands like this on the surface of Alpha Planet. For Ark and humans, such a barren land has no value. There are no ruins, no creatures, and no resources. It is not considered a dangerous location and has no value for development or garrison, but not long ago, a battleship airdropped 33 and his comrades onto this wasteland. Their superiors told them that their mission was to eliminate the heretical sect believers found in the area, but they looked around 33 times, but could not find even a trace of a heretical sect believer. He looked at his teammates with some confusion, only to find that they looked like they were facing a formidable enemy, holding loaded firearms with safety on, their index fingers pressed against the trigger guard, ready to fire at any time. "Prepare. Have you found the target?" 33 couldn't help but ask. No one responded to him. All the soldiers who were with him were marching on the wasteland in silence. From the looks of them, they seemed to have determined the location of the target. 33's eyes swept over the faces of these soldiers one by one. Their faces were very blurry, so blurry that 33 could only vaguely see the outlines of their facial features. These outlines gave him an extremely familiar feeling, and he always felt he thought he could call the names of these comrades, but when he wanted to call one of them by name, he found that he couldn't remember anything. If you don't think about it, those memories will stay in that position, making 33 aware but unable to look carefully. But if you think about it deliberately, these memories will become like a frightened little beast, disappearing in an instant. Trace. Just when 33 felt that the air was starting to become sticky, a soldier suddenly fell to the ground and twitched all over. "What's going on? What's wrong with you?" 33 stopped and asked loudly. The soldier didn't reply, he just lay on the ground and twitched constantly, while the other soldiers turned a blind eye and walked past him and continued to move forward. "Medical? Where is the medic?" 33 shouted. "Someone needs help." "Damn it, didn't any of you see him?" Still no one answered. Not only could these soldiers not see or hear the soldier who fell to the ground, they also could not see or hear 33's voice. Everyone is like a puppet on a clockwork, maintaining the same posture, moving forward, moving forward, moving forward. 33 began to look for traces of medical soldiers in the crowd, but soon, he discovered something even more terrifying. In this team of more than 20 people, not only did he not find any medical soldiers wearing Red Cross armbands or Red Cross logos printed on the sides of their helmets, he also did not find any soldiers with special duties. All the soldiers seemed to be carved out of the same mold. They wore the same uniforms, held the same weapons, maintained the same posture, and took the same steps. Even the numbers on their armbands are the same. The armbands are clear, not as blurry as their faces. Each armband has the same number, BHL 10077. This is the dog tag number of 33 when he served in the Field Corps. Every soldier here is himself. P.S. Thanks to the soap usefulness and reading giraffe for the 1,500 starting coins, Thanks to I am Boy for the 500 starting coins, thank you to the Energetic Self for the 200 starting coins, thanks to Bookfriend 202211301945087002, Bookfriend 201705031544067777 for the reward 100 starting coins. P.P.S.K refers to performance indicators, the root of all evil. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, and Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 937. How could this happen? How could this happen? 33 eyes widened and he kept mumbling to himself. No, not all the soldiers were wearing his clothes and wearing armbands embroidered with his military status number. The soldier lying on the ground twitching, he was different from the others. 33 wanted to see his armband, but found that the numbers on the armband were as blurry as the facial features of these soldiers. The next second, this blurred visual effect had spread to the soldiers' bodies, and 33 could only see one who was barely able to the shadow of a humanoid figure was curled up on the ground, just like the harmonious mosaics in the news pictures. What's going on? What's going on? 33 felt unspeakable fear welling up from his heart, but for some reason, he didn't feel anything wrong with these weird scenes. It seemed that all of this was extremely real and happened before his eyes. The blurry shadow on the ground began to twist. It no longer maintained its human shape, but suddenly expanded, just like an adult insect emerging from a cocoon. The completely deformed figure split from the middle, and an indescribable monster many times larger than the original figure stood up from it. To say that this monster is indescribable is not because Sanzan can't find the words to describe it, but because this monster, like the previous figure, is shrouded in a mist. The indescribable monster walked towards 33, and it seemed to be saying something to 33. 33 could hear those whispers like sleep, but he couldn't distinguish the content of the whispers at all. The more he listened, the pain in my head becomes more and more, as if it is about to burst. Go to hell. 33 finally threw away the last trace of reason, picked up the assault rifle in his hand, and pulled the trigger. But 33 didn't feel the resistance on the trigger, and the gunshot didn't sound. He looked down and saw what kind of assault rifle he was holding in his hand. It was clearly a bloody severed arm. The surrounding wasteland turned into a sea of fire at some point. Thick smoke covered the sky and the sun. The choking smell kept getting into 33's nostrils. The silent soldiers were now in pieces on the ground. The corpses, some even had their entire bodies crushed to pieces. Looking down from the sky, they looked like tomatoes that fell from a high altitude and hit the ground hard. The sight of corpses everywhere made 33 forget to breathe. He raised his head and looked into the sky. The airship that sent them to this place had long since disappeared. Only a few reconnaissance planes were hovering in the sky, and soon they flew higher and farther into the sky, disappearing from 33's sight. Inside, 33 knew that they had become abandoned children. No, they were no longer there, only himself was left. He is an outcast, and no one cares about his life or death. Huh. 33 breathed heavily, raised his head, and looked at the monster approaching. He threw away the severed arm in his hand, took out the military axe from his waist, and charged forward with a roar. He had already had the will to die, but this indescribable monster didn't seem to be very strong. It was easy for Sanzan-san to get closer, and the sharp axe blade wedged hard into the monster's body. The feeling of the axe cutting was very strange, as if it was cutting into a ball of high-density cotton wool. The erratic feeling made 33 feel very unsteady. He pushed the axe blade forward with force, trying to chop. Go deeper. Since the monster's body surface is covered with this cotton-like material, then there must be something solid at the core, right? Hack it to death. Cut it. Chop it. 33 wanted to continue to exert force, and a tentacle covered with pustules was thrown out from the monster's body, slapped on his abdomen, and his whole body was whipped out, and then he was slapped to the ground hard. 33 heard the sound of his own bones breaking, but at this time, his pain seemed to have been stripped away, and this body seemed to be not his own. He did not know which bone was broken or can't feel any pain. Anyway, there were no restrictions on the movement of the body. 33 jumped up from the ground again, and rushed towards the monster with an axe in his hand. This will go on forever. Kaylan looked at the crazy 33 in front of him, constantly dodging and blocking his attacks and those all-pervasive black flying blades. If this continues, either 33 will be killed. 13 died of exhaustion, or there was a loophole in his defense and he was hit in the head by a black flying blade. The brain is Ian's only critical point. If the brain is damaged, things will be in trouble. The trouble here does not refer to death, but something that scares Kaylan more than death. In the fight just now, a black flying blade successfully penetrated Ian's defense net and cut a gash along the edge of the skull. The tip of the blade penetrated the bones, ligaments and fascia. A half-inch deep wound was created on the side of the brain. The wound healed quickly, and even the damaged bones grew back immediately, but in these few seconds, Kaylan always felt as if there was something missing and something extra in his brain. He had forgotten some of the trivial things in his daily life. He couldn't remember the last time the hunting god hunting group had a dinner and who was present. Hound, Akira Asano, Zofia and others were also there. His memory became a little blurry. In addition, his fighting skills have become a lot rusty. Several attacks that he should have prevented were missed due to his deformation movements, and more wounds were left on his body by the black flying blades. This was not due to exhaustion. With Ian's physical condition, he could fight with such intensity for more than 10 hours without being physically exhausted. He just forgot. Not only has the brain forgotten, but also the muscles, forgetting those slashing and blocking movements, forgetting those techniques for exerting force. The cold engineer shovel always makes Kaylan feel panicked when he holds it in his hand. The original feeling of comfort and ease can never be regained. What's even more terrible is that the missing part of the memory does not leave a hole, but a substitute appears. It was as if there were hundreds of people mumbling to themselves in Ian's head. Kaylan could tell that they were using the language of the Alpha civilization, but those sentences were fragmented and could not form complete words that could express their meaning. Whispering is like the meaningless beep and ah sounds a baby makes when learning to speak. It has no value at all. Kaylan is basically certain that he has become a truly immortal body. Even if the brain is destroyed, the brain tissue can still be restored, but the more parts are restored, the more things he forgets, those meaningless things. His mind would be filled with murmurs and confusing fragments. If the whole brain was restored again, would he still be the same Kaylan? Just like the ship of Theseus in the illusion, if any plank in the hull is damaged, it will be immediately replaced with a new plank. After all the planks on the whole ship have been replaced, the ship can still be regarded as the original one. That boat pulled out of the shipyard? Kaylan doesn't know what will happen when he forgets everything. Maybe he will become a fool, maybe he will completely fall into madness, or maybe he will become someone or something's puppet, but no matter which ending, are not what he wants to see. This kind of ending is really not as simple as dying happily. Could it be that we can only kill 33? Kaylan stared closely at 33's face, even though he was not the first group of people to form the god hunting group, and she had only known him for a few months, but some people, it doesn't take a long time to get along to determine that the other person is the kind of person you can trust with your life. 33 is just such a person. If possible, Kaylan really wanted to let him live. I can't wake him up, and I don't want to kill him, and I can't knock him out. Kaylan thought hard about the countermeasures, and in a daze, a light flashed in front of his eyes. There is a way. Kaylan kicked away a flying blade that was shot at an angle, turned around and ran out of the jungle. 33 immediately followed, hot on his heels. If I remember correctly, go out from the exit of the hunting ground and walk 1,000 meters to the right. At the third intersection, that place should be deep enough. Kaylan thought as he ran, 33 the speed is not much slower than him, especially on the streets of the city, there are many nano-alloy components in the ruins of buildings. 33 uses those building materials containing nano-alloy as the base of the slingshot to the power between himself and nano-alloy serves as the bowstring of a slingshot, constantly bouncing, just like Kaylan did in the garbage tunnel. Every time he exerts force, he can eject himself hundreds of meters away. Distance. In addition to ejection movements, those abandoned building components would also rise from the ruins from time to time, and hit Kaylan with large pieces of concrete or other gold and stone materials. Forcibly controlling this tonnage of nano-alloy creations against 33 is a huge burden, but at this time he doesn't care at all about the damage caused by overdraft ability to the body. Even though the blood flowing out of his nostrils has made 33's face as pale as paper, he still cares about Kaylan. Pursues Kaylan relentlessly. It seems that for him, as long as he can kill Kaylan, it is not a pity to pay any price. Boom! A concrete block with a diameter of more than 15 meters fell heavily on Ian's side, pressing one of Ian's arms directly into it. This concrete block was 1/3 of the foundation of a building on the street. 33 forcibly pulled out this piece of foundation and threw it at Kaylan. Although Kaylan barely dodged the giant thing that fell on his head, he still paid the price of an arm. Kaylan did not hesitate to cut off his arm, which was pressed under the concrete block and had turned into a mixture of broken bones and meat residue, and continued to run forward. The city was undoubtedly his home ground for 33, and the ability can be brought into full play here, and this advantage will be strengthened several times compared to that in the jungle hunting ground. Not only that, the mental power of 33 trapped in the dream was not restricted, but was greatly increased. It is absolutely impossible for 33 in the waking state to rely on a few nanoalloys to connect half of the body. There is no steel bar to lift a concrete block weighing dozens of tons. Even if he bites his teeth into pieces, he can't do it. But now, he just waved, and the houses on both sides of the street seemed to have been blasted by directed blasts. All fell towards Kaylan. Several times, Kaylan was buried directly in the ruins. He forced his way out with all his injuries. What greeted him were more, larger, and heavier components, as well as those hidden in the rubble and black flying blades in the dust. Kaylan felt that he was almost reaching his limit. Although he was numb to the pain and the wounds on his body would heal as soon as they appeared, but his spirit had begun to tire. Several times, he wanted to give up, go back and help 33 find relief. It is not difficult for him to kill 33. 33's attack methods are completely undefensive. Kaylan doesn't even need to get close. He just needs to shoot 33 in the head to end it all. It's not like Kaylan has never shot 33. He tried to shoot 33's knees and ankles, but when the bullet was about to hit these parts that would affect 33's movements, there would always be a few black flying blades flying out to block the bullet. But when Kaylan aimed at vital points like 33's head or heart, the black flying blades spared no effort to attack Kaylan. Is his dream controlled by Nieto? It seems that Nieto is determined that he is unwilling to kill his companions. Kaylan sighed. The best way to get out of the predicament is naturally to kill 33. But Kaylan didn't want to do that unless he had to. Even if he knew that Nieto would take advantage of this, he still wanted to save 33's life. Finally, Ian's planned destination appeared in his sight. It was a large pit at the intersection. Judging from the shape and depth of the pit, it didn't look like it had been dug out by a machine, but like it had been dug deep. The hole was created by the explosives buried underground. This pit was probably left by the residents of the Hive City when they fought against the disaster. There are many traces of battles like this throughout the Hive City. But that's not important. What's important is that the pit is deep enough, and there are no components made of nano-alloy at the bottom of the pit. Kaylan ran to the edge of the pit, picked up the few items containing nano-alloy beside the pit, threw them far away, and then watched 33 rush towards him. Kaylan was forced to have his legs removed by the black flying blade. He ran into Sansan's arms, grabbed Sansan's shoulders with his newly grown arm, and twisted his waist hard. With such force, 33 was thrown directly into the big pit. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 938. 33 fell into the pit and seemed to have broken his bones. After struggling a few times, he finally failed to stand up. Breaking a few bones is better than dying. Kaylan glanced at 33 lying at the bottom of the pit. After making sure that the other person's breathing and heart rate were still stable, he turned and walked towards the jungle. Oh, I didn't expect that I would be the only one left in the end. Kaylan sighed and rubbed the newly healed incision on his abdomen. When Kaylan returned to the place where he killed the Epsilon-level mutant, the area that had been cleared had gradually become lively, and some larger mutant creatures also began to appear in Ian's area. Within the field of vision, these mutants showed obvious hostility towards Kaylan at first, but after Kaylan killed several ungrateful thorns with a completely crushing attitude, the remaining mutants obviously learned a lot, seeing that Kaylan was basically walking around. Even if he had the courage not to run away, he would just hide in the dark and observe, not daring to come forward to provoke Kaylan. The IQs of these mutants are not low. In this small and highly competitive jungle hunting ground, creatures that can last for 500,000 years without being exterminated must have unique survival wisdom even if they do not have strong physical strength. However, this way, it reduced many unnecessary battles for Kaylan. This time, it took him less than 15 minutes from the time he entered the jungle to reach the center. The gunshot he and 33 heard just now came from the center of the jungle. In other words, the person who shot, or the thing should be not far from Kaylan, if it hasn't moved during this time. Kaylan began to become cautious. He used the cover of tree trunks and bushes to move in an S shape. In this way, he could cover his body and search the area to the maximum extent. Fan. Kaylan is more inclined to think that some kind of inanimate mechanism triggered the pistol. This is most likely a little trick of Nieto. The purpose is also very simple. If a normal person hears the sound of gunshots in the forest with poor vision, the first reaction is probably to look up into the air. Although the flames and smoke from the muzzle cannot rise to such a high place, as long as you find a place where birds are frightened and flew up, you can basically determine the location of the shot. If Kaylan and Sansan had looked up at that time, the first thing they would have seen would not have been the birds that were frightened by the gunshots in the forest, but the bird that Nieto had tried so hard to get them to see. Dome. No. That's not right. Kaylan carefully recalled the details of when he heard the gunshots earlier, and overturned this guess in just a few seconds. If Nieto's purpose was really to trick him into raising his head, let alone the success rate of this little trick. Its timing was simply a mess. At that time, Kaylan and 33 had already gone deep into the jungle hunting ground, and the tree canopy was so dense that it completely obscured the entire hunting ground. Even at that time, Kaylan and 33 looked up and could only see dense branches and leaves. Although Kaylan showed disdain for Nieto, he also knew very well that it was impossible for a biological computer with super intelligence to make such a low-level mistake. There was another reason for the gunfire. Kaylan suddenly squatted down and carefully observed the ground in front of him. The soil about 5 meters away from him had traces of being recently turned over, but the traces were not obvious. The person who turned over the soil was backfilling the soil. It was obviously a cover-up. Could it be some kind of mutant map's lair? Kaylan thought in his heart. Since the shooter was probably lurking nearby, Kaylan followed the principle of doing more than doing less and did not intend to alarm the mutant in the lair, but just as he looked away at this time, Nieto's voice suddenly rang. You actually discovered it, are you really not going to dig it up and take a look? What is buried in the soil? Kaylan asked in a low voice, a high-level mutant. A bomb that can blow up half of the upper city? Or a side that can reflect the scene of the dome through the leaves? Mirror. No, I assure you in the name of the great God that there is no danger in the things buried here, Nieto said, and, according to your memory, you should know him. Him. There is a person buried inside. Ian's heart skipped a beat. If the person buried in the soil is really an acquaintance of his, then there is a high probability that he is his teammate who entered the grey mist forest with him. Valentina? Akira Asano? Ivan? Or is it the lumberjack Denning who disappeared earlier? Could it be that some of them have already been killed? Although Kaylan knew that the man buried in the ground was most likely a corpse, he couldn't help but walked closer and inserted the engineer shovel into it. Huh? Don't you suspect this is a trap? Nieto asked strangely. If you dare to swear in the name of that bullshit god, I will believe you just once, Kaylan said. But after all, while Kaylan was digging the soil, he quietly pulled away the tab of a high-explosive grenade and held it in his hand. At the same time, he also moved his eyes elsewhere, using the corners of his eyes as much as possible. Use your peripheral vision to observe the excavation work, in case there is really a huge mirror or a display screen underneath. However, this probability should not be high. If Nieto can really get a display screen that can display the real scene of the dome, then there are more than 100 ways to make this display screen appear in front of Ian's eyes. There is no need to use such lame means to trick Kaylan. The soil was deliberately compacted, but it was still much looser than the surrounding ground. The excavation process was very easy. After a while, 2 white leg bones appeared in Ian's field of vision. Kaylan took a deep breath and continued digging. Judging from the length of the leg bones, the deceased should be a man or a tall man. Valentina and Asano Akira can basically be ruled out. The only remaining options are Ivan and Danning. This is not far from Ian's expectation. It is not difficult for Valentina, who has the blasphemer mecha, and Akira Asano, who is extremely powerful, to survive in the grey fog forest. In comparison, Ivan and Danning's fighting power is much weaker than the two of them. Putting aside the weird grey fog forest, if Ivan and Danning were left in this jungle hunting ground, they would probably be killed by the mutants in the jungle within a few hours. Don't be Ivan, don't be Ivan. Kaylan muttered silently in his heart while speeding up the movements of his hands. After a while, he dug out a complete human skeleton from the soil. Come out. But at this time, Kaylan fell into confusion. The height of this skeleton is between 1.83 and 1.85 meters, while Ivan's height is 1.78 meters, which doesn't match up at all. If anyone in the hunting group is this tall, it is probably Zwilligita, who is only 1.85 meters. But the problem is that Zwilligita is not in the team for this operation at all. As for the guy named Danning in the lumberjack team, although Ian's memory of Danning has been a little blurry, he can still be sure that this skeleton is definitely not Danning. Danning's height is just over 1.8 meters, which is not bad, but Danning has one very striking feature, which is so prominent that Kaylan will not forget it even if he forgets his appearance. Danning's right little finger is only half length. According to his own words, he accidentally made a mistake while operating the woodcutter and was cut off by the saw blade. Later, because the impact was not big, he did not install the expensive and frequent maintenance Cybergate machine. Body. As for the skeleton in front of me, the little finger of the right hand is intact. It is impossible for Denning to be treated by bone-setting surgery in this place. Even if it were possible, there would be obvious traces of growth and healing between the attached phalange and the original bone. However, there are no such traces on the phalanges of this corpse until it dies. All 10 of its fingers are original goods brought out of its mother's womb. It's not Ivan, it's not Danning. Who could it be? Kaylan checked the corpse and found no clues, so he had to focus on the excavated soil and the pit where the body was buried. Kaylan soon discovered some fabric fragments mixed in the soil. These fabric fragments should be the clothes worn by the deceased, but these fabric fragments were strongly corroded and did not look like they had just been buried. The way it was buried in the soil, if Kaylan hadn't dug this hole with his own hands, he would have even doubted whether the corpse had been buried here for more than 10 years. He held the fabric fragments between his fingertips and rubbed them gently. The fabric, whose fiber structure was destroyed, quickly turned into crumbs. However, Kaylan got some important clues from the texture of the fiber crumbs. This is a kind of polymer fabric that is very common on the Ark. This kind of fabric has good performance but is not expensive. It is very popular with mercenaries and ruin hunters, but Kaylan and his hunting group people would not wear clothes made of this kind of fabric. There is no shortage of money anyway. The equipment Kaylan and the others choose are all top-notch, and they don't consider cost-effectiveness at all. For them, even if they spend 100 times the money, as long as the performance can be improved by 1%, it's all worth it. If nothing else, the price of Ian's mediocre windbreaker, which has been torn into broken fishing nets, is worth the price of this year's new product from Anaheim Electronics, the flagship supercar launched, and it's the top-of-the-line model. As for consumers who pay the most attention to cost-effectiveness, Kaylan couldn't help but think of two words: army. Is this man a mercenary, a relic hunter, or a soldier? Ian's brain was spinning rapidly as he rummaged through the soil to find more fabric fragments. Finally, at the bottom of the pit, he found a rusty ring buckle. Even though the buckle had the inscriptions can no longer be seen clearly, but Kaylan still recognizes the interlocking pattern. This is the safety buckle on the Ark Air Force Fleet pilot's uniform. It is a device used to fix the pilot and the seat together. When encountering an unexpected situation, just pull the buckle gently to quickly release the seat belt. It is a very important safety design. The design of the safety buckle has a long history. At first, the safety buckle was only found on driving uniforms, but later it became a practical decoration on pilots' uniforms. Is this man an Air Force Fleet pilot? But, do you know such a person? If it was someone he knew, then this person must have nothing to do with Rooney and the others. He might not even have been born when Rooney and the others found the nest. How did the pilots of the Air Force Fleet appear here? Who killed him? If he was killed and buried here, why did the body and clothes decay so quickly? A series of questions emerged from Ian's heart, but just when Kaylan was extremely puzzled, white mist gradually seeped in from all directions and filled the forest. What's going on with all this fog? Kaylan stood up warily, took a few steps back, leaned against a tree trunk as thick as a dozen people's arms, and looked around. The jungle hunting ground filled with fog and the grey mist forest outside is actually very similar, and the only difference is that the fog in the grey mist forest is grey, very thick and extremely toxic and corrosive, but the current fog is just mist, and the color is closer to white. Do you like hunting games? Nieto said with a hint of smile. I don't like it, Kaylan objected casually. But the people who lived here at that time loved it very much, Nieto said. This hunting ground was the best entertainment project in their boring lives, bar none. They cloned all kinds of the creatures were put here and hunted to their heart's content. Later, they felt that hunting wild beasts had lost their fun, so they began to genetically modify the beasts to turn them into powerful monsters. Later, even the monsters began to make these people feel when they get bored, they turn their attention to their own kind. Hunters, hunt people. I'm not interested in hearing what you said. What's going on with this fog? Kaylan knew what Nieto said. In the memory fragments, he had seen with his own eyes that the powerful children living in the upper city with the contestants selected by the bottom nest are hunted as prey. In their eyes, there is no difference between those bottom nest people and beasts. Perhaps, the bottom nest people have more points. In order to satisfy those people's fun, the hunting ground can simulate many kinds of weather, including foggy days, Nieto said. Now, the hunting begins. I wish you a happy game. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chenmi-san. Chapter 939. The hunt begins. As soon as Nieto's voice ended, Kaylan felt a strong warning sign and quickly leaned down and rolled into the big hole he had just dug. The next moment, the gunshot of the large caliber hunting pistol rang out again, and a strong wind passed through Ian's back, bringing with it a burning pain. Obviously, when Nieto refers to hunting, the prey refers to Kaylan. As for who the hunter is. Bang! Before Kaylan could climb out of the pit, another gunshot rang out. This time, Kaylan failed to avoid the second shot. The large caliber warhead hit his right shoulder, and the huge kinetic energy attached to it hit Kaylan. Ian's whole body flipped over on his back and fell heavily back into the pit. And his entire right arm was torn directly from his torso by the warhead and flew far away. Severe pain came from the broken arm, but compared to the pain, what made Kaylan feel a little worse was a top-heavy feeling of collapse. His self-healing ability and limb regeneration ability were not completely exhausted. In the battle with 33 just now, the body's energy has been consumed to the tune of 7,788, and to regrow a limb, the energy and materials required are hundreds or even thousands of times that of healing a wound. Kaylan would rather be stabbed to the core by a black flying blade than have an arm or a leg chopped off. He looked back at the part of the broken arm. The bleeding had stopped. Small granules began to emerge from the torn flesh and blood, and a light gray viscous liquid began to secrete from the white bone stubble. When this fluid dries up, new bone can form. It's just that compared to before, Ian's limb regeneration speed has slowed down a lot. Although he can use his mind to urge his limbs to regenerate faster, doing so will cause dizziness and hypoglycemia. The same side effects as symptoms are of course no problem under safe conditions, but the current situation requires Kaylan to maintain a high degree of mental concentration at all times. If his eyesight goes dark at this time, I am afraid it will go dark forever. If we can pick up the broken arm and reattach it, the physical exertion will be much less. Kaylan lay on the edge of the pit and looked out. The severed arm flew out more than 10 meters away. At his speed, it rushed. It won't take more than a second to pick it up and jump back into the pit. But he didn't dare to gamble. The other party's reaction was also very fast. Kaylan just raised his head, and the other party directly pulled the trigger. Even though he had a keen sense of danger, he only had time to avoid the vital part of his head and use his right shoulder to catch it. This shot, if the whole person jumped out of the pit, without a bunker, getting shot would be completely unavoidable. And the most terrible thing, is the bullet used by the opponent. It is a special kind of bullet. The warhead has a 3-layer structure. The first layer is an armor-piercing layer made of depleted uranium alloy with a lower melting point. It will burn and produce self-sharpening properties after hitting the target. It is a very famous depleted uranium armor-piercing bullet in the old era. An improved version, and the third layer is a bullet core forged from pure nano alloy. Even if the depleted uranium layer fails to break through the target's armor, the needle-shaped nano alloy bullet core can drive in like a nail. But these two layers are not the key. The key lies in the second layer in the middle. The name of the second layer is called biomass digestion layer. It is a new material that the Institute just successfully developed last year. It is also called active ammunition version 2.0 within the Institute and the military. It is said to be a material, but actually it is not. Rather, it is a special genetically modified bacterium. This bacterium devours all organic matter it comes into contact with and converts it into a substance that resembles rotten cotton wool. This kind of bacteria was originally developed to deal with giant mutants like that. No matter how hard the carapace or skin is, a big hole will be quickly corroded in front of the warhead made by this kind of bacteria. With version 1.0 with active ammunition, in theory, individual soldiers can also use light weapons to hunt powerful mutants. Of course, the hunting god hunting group has also been assigned a batch of trial products. Kaylan has tested it in private. This kind of bacteria can easily penetrate even living armor. Just now Kaylan has actually condensed into a layer of 2 centimeters thick on his shoulders. the living armor, but still failed to block the warhead. The only function of the living armor is probably to protect Ian's torso from being torn apart by the huge kinetic energy transmitted from the shoulders. Huh. Lan gasped, and used his remaining left hand to pull out the pistol stuck under his ribs, and loaded the bullet with the help of his teeth. He really wanted to imitate the murderer in John Wick without blinking an eye. The protagonist of the movie has a very cool one-handed loading machine, but the spring of the military pistol slide is extremely stiff, the stroke is long, and it has multiple safety devices, making it impossible to load the gun with one-handed operation. There are 5 rounds left, counting the one in the chamber, 6 rounds. Lan pulled out the magazine, glanced at the transparent observation window on the side of the magazine, then put it on his leg and pushed it back. The fog outside was very heavy, and the visibility was only about 5 meters, but judging from the sound of gunfire, the man using the large caliber hunting pistol was about 30 to 50 meters away from Lan. Even if there was no tree trunks in the straight line to block it, it is definitely impossible to see through such a thick layer of fog with the naked eye. Either the opponent has special visual abilities, or he has additional detection tools. Lan suddenly glanced at a dim red light hidden behind the white mist from the corner of his eye, and immediately raised his pistol and pointed it at directly above his shot. The next moment the gunfire rang out, something fell next to Lan. He turned around and saw that it was a palm-sized drone. This drone has its own thermal imaging camera and can easily target location in heavy fog. Seeing this drone, Lan breathed a sigh of relief. If he had to choose, instead of letting his opponent have the advantage of mysterious capabilities, he would rather let the opponent have the advantage of technology. At least Lan was familiar with things on the technological side, and he could use the known theories and knowledge to deal with them. As for the abilities on the mysterious side, those things didn't make sense at all. After shooting down a drone, Lan did not stand up rashly. Vaguely, he felt that there was more than one line of sight peering at him. The other party might have more than one drone, or maybe, he was shooting. Users can directly access the observation system of the jungle hunting ground. Nieto said that heavy fog is one of the multiple weather simulations in the jungle hunting ground. It can be used as a viewing activity or competition. The organizer will definitely not let the audience outside the venue only see a vast white fog. Therefore, even in a foggy environment, there must be a way to see the entire hunting ground clearly. If we just rely on thermal imaging. Lan tried to lift one of his legs, and wrap the leg with thick enough living armor, so that the external temperature of this leg dropped to almost the same as the environment. No shots were fired. Lan took a deep breath, let the living armor cover his whole body, and then moved out of the pit bit by bit. Still no gunshots were fired. It seems that it really relies on the temperature difference to lock the target. Lan calmed down and ran quickly to the location where the broken arm fell. However, he just ran a few steps away when a grenade with the latch unplugged. He flew out of the fog and fell into the pit where he had just been lying down. Damn it, Lan leaned over and picked up the severed arm from the ground, then rolled and dodged behind a thick enough tree trunk. Boom! A huge explosion sounded. It was a defensive grenade with a large yield, and it was filled with crystalline explosives. Its power was enough to blast through the frontal armor of a standard walker. Violent vibrations came along the ground, and the sand and gravel with a hint of residual warmth fell on Ian's head and shoulders. The pit that could only accommodate one person was instantly filled. It was enlarged several times, and the skeleton of Lan, whose identity had not yet been figured out, was blown up to the point where there was no residue left. It seems that the target has disappeared through thermal imaging, so I threw a grenade into the pit to test it. Lan muttered in his heart, if this guy only has modern weapons like guns and grenades, it's not difficult to deal with. As long as you can keep your body surface temperature consistent with the environment, you will be invisible in this heavy fog. Just when Lan was about to use stealth to reach in the direction of the shooter, the tree trunk he was leaning against suddenly sank, and countless strange-shaped branches penetrated the bark of the tree, trapping Ian's body. "Get up!" The shape of these branches is like the withered arms of a mummy, hugging Lan tightly, while the tree trunk behind him is dissolving, and a large amount of gum flow with a strong and pungent smell is secreted, killing Lan. The back is firmly stuck to the tree trunk. Trap? No, that's not right. This tree is also a mutant. It is also a hunter in this jungle, Lan reacted suddenly. Many sharp wooden thorns have grown on those branches. These wooden thorns pierced Ian's skin and began to suck Ian's flesh and blood. But just when Lan was about to use brute force to break free, something unexpected happened to him. This man-eating tree died in just a few seconds after sucking his flesh and blood. The branches that held Lan tightly a second ago withered in the blink of an eye, and then turned into ashes. Even the extremely sticky gum turned into a fishy pus with a texture like egg white. "Good guy, your feelings have been poisoned by my blood." Lan couldn't help but sigh in his heart. He knew that his body was special, but he never thought that he could poison a tree in such a short time. A mutant plant with a high level. To put it this way, wouldn't it be that Miss Soma, who had been intimate with him, was on the verge of death every time? This toxicity should be limited to flesh and blood, right? A certain kind of special body fluid shouldn't be poisonous, right? But the problem is, when two people enter a state of selflessness, they will also bite each other. Lan was laughed at by a hound because of the tooth marks on his neck. Why didn't Sophia have an accident at that time? Did this change only happen after he entered the grey mist forest? As the degree of erosion deepens, the degree of mutation of the body is also gradually increasing, even though it still looks human from the outside. In fact, maybe the tentacle-covered flesh and blood monster that 33 saw in his hallucination was closer to a human being than himself? Lan didn't have time to think about more irrelevant things. After getting rid of the man-eating tree, he began to crawl on the ground. This moving posture may not look elegant, but at least it can avoid being caught by the enemy as much as possible. The drones in the sky were discovered. At the same time, even if the opponent adopted a blind shooting method, the area affected by the bomb could be minimized by staying close to the ground. If I were that person, after the thermal imaging function fails, I should control the drone to lower its altitude and search for targets within the visual distance. However, the sound of the propellers of these drones is still very obvious. As long as the sound is heard if I get closer, I can shoot down the drone before it finds me, Lan thought silently in his mind. The position where the man fired his last shot was at 1 o'clock, about 35 meters away, and the defensive grenade weighed 9 kilograms. It was said to be a grenade, but it was actually heavier than many bombs, unless it was a high-level enhanced person or a modified person with mechanical arm assistance. Ordinary people cannot throw this thing 30 meters away. The other party is also approaching here. Lan held the gun in his left hand, and grabbed the engineer's shovel with his newly connected right hand. Bending his knees slightly, he had crawled forward 15 meters, and if the other party was also moving in the opposite direction, they might collide at any time now. As long as anything moving appears in the white mist, Lan will immediately jump up, first chop at the opponent's lower body with the engineer's shovel, and then bring the pistol closer to shoot, directly sending the bullet into the opponent's body. He held his breath and lay on the ground like a toad, waiting for the opportunity to come. However, Lan failed to wait until the shooter entered his attack range, but instead waited for another grenade. This is a lighter offensive grenade, which mainly relies on the steel balls stuck to the grenade shell to cause damage. The grenade was not thrown directly towards Lan, but landed on the right side of Lan. 5 meters away. This means that the other party did not discover Ian's exact location, but judged that Lan was ambushing in this area and planned to use a grenade to get out of a safe zone. Lan did not choose to pick up the grenade and throw it back. Instead, he used his living armor to forcibly carry the shooting steel balls, maintaining a motionless posture and reducing his pulse and heart rate to the lowest level. The effective killing radius of the steel ball of this grenade is 10 meters, which means that the opponent is likely to be within 10 meters at this time. P.S. Thanks to Lanchin Wine Lane for the 1,500 starting coins. Alien Relic Hunter author, and Chen-Mi San. Chapter 940. If K-Lan jumps up at this time and shoots randomly in the direction of 1 o'clock, there is a high probability that he will hit the opponent, but what the specific probability is, K-Lan is not sure. What if the other person is also a very cautious person and crawls on the ground like me? What if the opponent possesses equipment such as a bulletproof shield, or simply wears a suit of power armor? K-Lan still had 5 bullets left, and he didn't want to waste them without guaranteeing effective damage. Waiting and waiting may seem a bit stupid, but it is the safest plan at the moment. For a completely unknown enemy, there are too many variables in an encounter. In the case of an ambush, at least K-Lan can still take the initiative in his own hands. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. 10 minutes passed, but there was still no movement in the fog, not even gunshots or grenades. The guy who sniped at K-Lan seemed to have left. The other party also chooses to wait and see, K-Lan muttered in his heart, or, play hard to get. In this case, it is time to compete for the patience of both parties. Whoever loses his composure first will lose. 15 minutes, 20 minutes. K-Lan lay on the ground like a piece of rotten wood, unmoved even by a swarm of mutant ants crawling across his cheeks. He has always been patient. As long as he can achieve his goal, he can wait for as long as he wants, even in extremely dangerous and stressful situations. When he was still a lone hunter, K-Lan explored a sea-level ruins. That ruins were originally A-level, but the advanced team successfully destroyed the access control system of the ruins and made the ruins much more difficult. After taking away the most valuable things in the ruins were downgraded 2 levels in a row, from A level to sea level. But in any case, this is still a ruins with an initial rating of A. Although the access control system has been destroyed, it does not mean that the passages in the ruins are unobstructed. For hunters, those damaged mechanisms are still fatal. The advance team destroyed the access control system, but the destruction was not complete. Those passage doors would only open for a dozen seconds a day, and the opening time was completely random. Hunters who wanted to go deep into the ruins could only wait at the door, and in the end the terrible thing is that automatic defense systems are installed in front of these doors. As long as the hunters make a little louder noise, they will be triggered immediately. Hunters who want to enter this ruins have to squat in front of the door all day long, unable to talk or move around. They can only use straws to suck liquid food from their backpacks, and use diapers to go to the toilet. Even the rhythm of breathing and heartbeat must be deliberately controlled. There was once an independent hunter who was traveling with K-Lan. Just because he saw the gate open, his heart became excited and his breathing became a little heavier, and he turned into ashes in front of K-Ian's eyes. Stay focused, calm your mind, control your breathing. K-Lan muttered silently in his heart. He had closed his eyes, pressed his cheeks and ears against the moist soil on the ground, and felt all kinds of sounds coming from the ground. Such vibration. The rustling sound was the swarm of ants that had just crawled out of his face. The faint cracking sound and the subsequent friction sound were the sound of a fungus canopy opening after it emerged from the soil. There was also a burst of the rustling sound is the sound of the wind blowing the gravel and rolling it. All the sounds were heard. Although K-Lan closed his eyes, a three-dimensional image was painted in his brain. This was very close to Asano Akira's ability, but there are still differences between the two. Asano Akira actually relies on invisible tentacles of thought. Rather than hearing, it is better to say it is a disguised touch. K-Lan relied on his true hearing and the terrifying information processing and computing power of his brain to reconstruct various fragmented information into a complete scene. An hour passed, and what K-Lan didn't expect was that the first person to lose his composure was Nieto as a third-party bystander. Although Nieto lost control of most areas in the upper city, some rights were still retained, including the weather control system of the jungle hunting ground. A heavy rain fell without warning. The rain hit the tree crown, making a loud crackling sound, and then flowed down along the gaps between the leaves. As the rain fell, the mist that filled the forest gradually dissipated. Kaylan suddenly discovered that an extremely dense minefield had been formed within a radius of 30 meters centered on his position. Those anti-infantry mines were scattered around so casually, basically every few steps. There is one. Although these mines were not buried in the soil and were all exposed on the ground, under the current situation, Kaylan had no way to eliminate or bypass these mines. The triggering method of these anti-infantry landmines is omnidirectional laser remote sensing. As long as Kaylan comes within 5 meters, they will be triggered directly. What is even more troublesome is that these landmines are all non-lethal landmines. If it were the kind of landmine whose main killing effect relies on fragments, steel balls, or explosive shock waves, Kaylan might be able to survive this minefield with his living armor and powerful self-recovery. But non-lethal landmines are more trouble. These mines will not explode with fragments or steel balls, and the shock wave will be so small that it is almost negligible, but they will release a high voltage current that can cover a range of 10 meters. The voltage of this current is quite high. For ordinary people, it is enough to put people into a state of shock or even death. For Kaylan, although the high voltage current is not fatal, from a certain perspective, it is more powerful than anti-personnel landmines. More deadly, even if he is protected by living armor, he will fall into a brief state of paralysis when he is hit by electric current. The other party was not nearby. Apparently he had just set up the minefield and was hiding, waiting for Kaylan to be paralyzed by the electric mine before killing him. How did this guy manage to place so many electric mines nearby without making a sound? Kaylan lay on the ground, raised his head slightly, and looked around. Each electric mine was 5 meters apart. There is no gap for people to pass through. As for jumping over the minefield, Kaylan must jump to a height of more than 5 meters. Not to mention whether he can find a safe foothold after jumping. This height alone is enough to turn him into a living target in mid-air. Kaylan is not wearing a powered armor with a propeller, and Zlo's space ability cannot be used in this place. Jumping into the air cannot change direction. The enemy hiding in the dark can easily predict his movement trajectory. Then he fired, and Kaylan would definitely not be able to dodge. P.S. I went to the hospital to have my teeth checked during the day. There were a lot of people in the hospital. I took a nucleic acid test in the afternoon and the results haven't come out yet. Now I feel a little groggy and my nose is a little stuffy. I took a look at the book club in the afternoon and they were talking about big eyes. It seems that I have been tricked, which makes me very nervous now. I hope I didn't get infected. If I did get infected, with my physique and immunity, I might have to stop for a few more days. PPS there should be another chapter later. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Alien Relic Hunter, author, and Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 941. Unless, you can change direction urgently in mid-air. In this way, you can not only avoid the opponent's shooting, but also trick the opponent into shooting and find the opponent's hiding place. Kaylan glanced at the gun in his hand. It was a large caliber pistol with a caliber of 0.5 inches. It was the same as the one used by the opponent. The recoil was amazing, but it was difficult to rely solely on the recoil during shooting. Those who achieve a large emergency change of direction, the kind of picture that can increase the time in the air by shooting towards the ground, are either using more powerful weapons or are just soft science fiction purely for the pursuit of coolness. In reality, even if Kaylan fired all 5 bullets in the gun chamber at one go, he would only be able to move his body a few inches in mid-air at most. With such a magnitude of displacement, the opponent would definitely be able to hit the target as long as he fired 2 follow-up shots, and it wouldn't even count as a dodge. Just when Kaylan was thinking about how to get out of the minefield, his eyes suddenly stopped on those thick tree trunks. There is a way. Kaylan took a deep breath, and the living armor condensed into a hook connected to the chain at the end of his right hand. Using a simple ejection device, the hook flew out suddenly and was fixed on a tree where one person could hold it. On a thick tree. This tree is about 8 meters away from Kaylan, and the fixed position of the hook is about 10 meters above the ground. The moment the hook is embedded in the bark of the tree, the chain connected to the hook quickly tightens, carrying Kaylan's whole body. Soar into the sky. The moment Kaylan left the ground, he caught a glimpse of a black muzzle flashing out from behind a boulder 20 meters away from him in the 3 o'clock direction. Kaylan yanked the chain on his right hand hard, and the tree trunk fixed by the hook was immediately broken off. He chose the thinnest tree nearby in order to let the fallen trunk interfere with the opponent's shooting path. At the same time as the tree trunk fell, Kaylan released the hook on his right hand. The second hook on his left hand that had long been formed quickly shot out and was nailed to another tree beside him. He dragged Kaylan towards a completely different tree. Flying in different directions. Bang. Bang bang. Bang. The opponent fired 4 shots in a row, but except for the first shot, which was only a dozen centimeters away from Kaylan, the second and third shots went further and further away. After noticing that Kaylan had changed direction in the air, the fourth shot he pulled back was a direct shot. On top of the broken tree trunk. Boom. Crackling. The broken tree trunk fell to the ground, triggering a large area of deployed electrode mines, and a large bright and dazzling arc raging on the ground. However, at this time, Kaylan had already jumped to an altitude of more than 10 meters, performed a forward somersault, and closed down. He raised his hook and landed firmly on a horizontal branch. Kaylan took out his gun and pointed it at the boulder. However, when Kaylan pulled out his gun, the man hiding behind the boulder had already retreated, leaving Kaylan no room to fight back. Fortunately, before the opponent retracted, Kaylan had already used his time-stopping ability to capture a crucial frame. The hand holding the gun is a human hand. Judging from the skin color, it should be a white male. The pores, skin texture and subcutaneous blood vessels, bones and muscles on the back of the hand are clearly identifiable. It does not look like a racer. Borg prosthetic hand. If it is a prosthetic hand, it must be the kind of advanced bionic body used by members of the undead crew. The most important thing is that this hand shows no signs of mutation. Is it a human, not a corpse? If it was one of the battleship crew members who came in with Rooney and the others, it would be impossible for him to still maintain his human form. What's more, the bullets used by this person and the electric shock mines deployed were all new types developed in recent years. Weapons. In Rooney's time, there was no such thing. And there was the corpse that had just been dug up. It was a soldier. Although Kaylan couldn't remember any acquaintances in the army, Nieto did not lie to him. Subconsciously, the skeleton did have something. An inexplicable feeling of familiarity. Who killed him? Is that the man hiding behind the boulder? According to the looseness of the pit, it is estimated that the skeleton was buried for only a few hours. Based on this calculation, it is very likely that the gunshot heard before was the person who was killed, but the problem is, how could the person who was beaten to death a few hours ago turn into a skeleton so quickly? The soil in the jungle hunting ground is not corrosive. Under normal circumstances, it would take several months for a corpse to decompose to that level, and it would take decades for clothes made of that kind of fabric to begin to degrade. But it cannot be ruled out that a creature similar to the man-eating tree ate up the flesh and blood of the deceased, but when Kaylan thought in this direction, his subconscious kept hinting to him that this was a wrong guess. There was an aura on that corpse that Kaylan felt familiar. That was. Several scenes flashed back in Kaylan's mind: black skeleton, black bishop, holy word, sacrifice, black mummy. Kaylan finally found the source of this familiar aura. This corpse, he was sacrificed as a sacrifice during his lifetime. Did the dead initiate the sacrificial ritual? Or, the person who attacked him? Kaylan stared at the boulder and asked, I have something I want to talk to you about. What do you think? There was no response. I really want to know why you want to put me to death. Moreover, you seem to be familiar with my abilities and weaknesses, and have a lot of information about me. I think you should have come to kill me specially. Still no sound. You are still hiding behind the stone, which means that firearms can also cause fatal damage to you. In the current situation, I have obviously gained the advantage. Kaylan continued to shout, if you are willing to answer a few questions for me, if so, I can give you a chance for a fair duel. Still no movement. After 3 sentences, Kaylan no longer intends to negotiate. Although there are no connected bunkers around the boulder, there is no guarantee that there will not be a temporarily dug tunnel under the boulder. If the other party escapes, then Kaylan will spend so much effort to master it. The initiative is gone. Kaylan directly took out the gravity gun seized from the tunnel dweller and pointed it at the boulder. Although it would be a little difficult to distinguish the identity from a puddle of meat, but you carry so much equipment, there must be a lot of things on you that can provide clues. Kaylan said to himself without hesitation. The trigger was pulled. Boom. As if an invisible big hand took a picture from above, the hard boulder suddenly turned into powder. With the boulder in the center, the ground in the area with a radius of 5 meters sank by as much as half a meter, and the soil at the bottom of the pit was even more compacted. It's like a stone. The moment the gravity field took effect, Kaylan clearly saw blood splattering. The opponent did not escape, but was crushed to pieces together with the boulder. Should be dead. Kaylan jumped down from the tree and walked towards the big pit pressed by the gravity gun. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen San. Chapter 942. In the center of the pit, a large pool of blurred flesh and blood were mixed with crushed gravel, and dark red blood spattered in an explosive manner. It was obvious that he could no longer die. Even the large caliber pistol used by the opponent to sneak attack Kaylan was crushed into a thin discus. This is a 4th generation R-type large caliber hunting pistol produced by Magnum Industries. It uses full power Magnum bullets of 0.5-inch caliber, which is completely consistent with 33's judgment. However, when Ian's eyes moved to the handle of the pistol, his brows knitted together. There will be a series of laser-etched inscriptions on the handle of the pistol, indicating the production batch number and ownership of the gun. Although the inscription on this gun has been pressed into a lump, Kaylan can still see the 6 characters at the end of the inscription. Character, 15 SSHT. HT means hunting group, and SS is the pinyin abbreviation of the name of the hunting group, and the first 15 refers to the 15th pinyin abbreviation of the registered hunting group, which is SS the hunting group, and the 15th hunting group whose pinyin abbreviation is SS is Ian's hunting group. The handle of the pistol that Kaylan used also had the suffix inscription on it. This guy is a member of the hunting group. Kaylan knelt down and picked out the paper-thin piece of clothing from the pile of rotten meat. Judging from the fabric and style of the clothing, it should be a piece from the engineering department of the hunting god hunting group. Uniform. Engineering department. Kaylan was stunned for a moment. The engineering department of the hunting god hunting group is mainly managed by Leighton and Chi Hanfan. They are also fully responsible for recruiting people and allocating positions. Kaylan rarely interferes with it on weekdays. He only vaguely remembered that when he left ARC, the size of the engineering department had expanded to more than 100 people, but he really couldn't tell the specific names of each person, their origins, and their specialties. Why do people from the engineering department appear here? Kaylan thought. He knew that the undead crew had already plotted against the god of hunting group, but with the protection of Yagunakota and the body named Joker, the life safety of the hounds should be guaranteed. If not, At least they could escape from Alpha Planet in the Agunactor and go to the space beyond the control of the Undead Crew Club, thus temporarily avoiding the danger. It doesn't have to be very far. As long as it escapes from the Earth-Moon circle of Alpha Star, it will be difficult for ARC's fleet to locate Yagunactor. But this engineering department officer who appeared out of nowhere made Ian's heart arouse, although he was very reluctant to think in that direction, but now it seems that other people in the hunting group may also be involved. Could it be that Old Dog and the others were worried about my safety, so they directly controlled Yagunactor to drive into the grey mist forest? Kaylan looked at the engineering department uniform that was full of plasma in his hand, but, what if, the people in the hunting group should be my teammates rather than enemies? Why did he want to ambush me? Did he accidentally see the dome and his whole body was directly eroded? But the hand I just saw, doesn't look like there are signs of decay. Just when Kaylan was about to dig out the big hole made by the gravity gun, the mushy flesh and blood suddenly started to squirm. No, to be precise, it should be boiling, and the surface of the flesh and blood appeared. A large number of bubbles quickly enlarged and burst, releasing a strong fishy smell into the air. Even if Kaylan had no direct contact with the flesh and blood, he could feel that the temperature in the air was rising sharply. Not quite dead yet. Kaylan jumped back suddenly, jumped out of the pit, picked up the gravity gun, and pulled the trigger again. Boom! 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 The gravity gun fired 3 times in succession. The originally half-meter deep pit was turned into a vertical shaft in just a few seconds, and the light of the crystal pillar sealed in the glass tube above the gravity gun was completely extinguished. The energy is exhausted. This weapon is temporarily unusable until a backup energy source of the same specification is found or the charging method is mastered. Ian's 3 shots just used the maximum power. He was even worried that the ground in the upper city area would be directly crushed through, but it turned out that he had overthought it. The depth of the shaft had exceeded 100 meters, but the bottom well was the walls are still made of dirt and rocks, and not even the alloy hive structure can be seen. This means that the depth of the ground in the upper city is far above the lower city and the bottom hive. The 4th level of the hive city, Cloud Top, is probably an incredible place. But if you want to enter the 4th level, you must first get rid of the manager of the 3rd level, Nieto, and to find the identity of Nieto, you must first pass through this jungle hunting ground, and to pass through the jungle hunting ground, then the current threat must be eliminated. That person, or rather, that thing still didn't die after eating 3 rounds of the most powerful gravity gun. Those flesh and blood gathered together to form a dark red, slug-like creature, along the walls of the pit climbed up. The slug squirmed with its fat body. In just a few seconds, the mucous membrane on the surface hardened and solidified, forming a structure like a carapace. Kaylan picked up a stone and threw it hard, and the stone hit the carapace. It was shattered, but not even a scratch was left. The hardness of the carapace is no less than those high-strength alloys used as front armor of tanks. Kaylan is too lazy to take out a gun. Instead of wasting bullets, he might as well see what flowers this thing can produce. The other party didn't let Kaylan wait for long, but within a minute, cracks like tea eggs began to appear on the surface of the hard carapace. The next second, these carapace were shaken off like a layer of dead skin, and none of them were left. A wispy white man stood up from the debris on the ground. "Who are you?" Kaylan asked bluntly. In the eyes of the other party, he did not see any crazy, confused or fearful look. The other party's consciousness was in a very awake state, which meant that the attack just now was probably caused by his true intention. "Hunting God Hunting Group, Engineering Department Officer, Wilson," the white male replied, "you can call me by this name. You know, I'm asking about your true identity." Kaylan held up the gun, pointing the black muzzle at Wilson's eyebrows. Although the gun did not pose any threat to Wilson, using the gun, the deterrent effect of pointing is greater than pointing with an engineering shovel. "I don't know either," Wilson said very calmly, as if he was not the one who had a life or death duel with Kaylan just now. The person who created me only told me what the mission was, and did not give me any instructions name. If you insist on me naming a name, it would be Wilson. I have lived with this name and the identity represented by it for more than 10 years. Sometimes even I forget my true identity, in a way, I've been Wilson most of my life. Made. Living as Wilson for more than 10 years? Kaylan immediately captured these two key pieces of information in the other party's words. This time point was very sensitive. More than 10 years ago, Kaylan and the Prophet were also created by the undead crew more than 10 years ago, and there were a large number of defective products in the same batch as them. Those defective products were either directly destroyed, or used as consumables for interpreting alpha documents. Could it be that besides myself and the Prophet, there are actually 3 symbiotes that can survive for a long time? Who made you? Kaylan continued to ask. I don't know either. Wilson shrugged. He was unusually cooperative with Ian's series of questions. Actually, my memory is also incomplete. Most of the time, Wilson is the one who is awake. As for me, he spends part of the time in a state of hazy semi-slumber. Dual personality? Kaylan was slightly startled. If the other party did not lie, it means that there are 2 personalities in this body. Logically speaking, this is impossible. Kaylan has only collected very little information about the symbiote, but there is a very precise article in it, which states that if the symbiote has any mental illness, it must be destroyed immediately after being detected to prevent accidents from happening. If this guy has a dual personality, the undead crew should just throw him into the incinerator. No. Maybe not. After all, symbiote that can survive for a long time is too rare. There is no guarantee that someone from the immortal crew will not take risks and risk losing control to keep this Wilson. The people who made you are the undead crew, right? I don't know. Although Wilson's attitude was very cooperative, he was in a state of ignorance. Kaylan couldn't be sure whether he really didn't know or was pretending to be stupid. Why are you attacking me? Is this a task assigned to you by the person who created you? Kaylan asked while looking at the other person's condition. The Wilson in front of him looked no different from ordinary humans, except for his stronger physique. In addition, there are no signs of strengthening or transformation, and those mutant tissues like monsters are completely invisible. Only the eggshell-like carapace fragments still remind Kaylan of the person in front of him. How it was just resurrected. My mission is to retrieve your brain. This thing is very important, Wilson said. As for whether you are dead or alive, I don't care. If you are willing to give up resistance, then I can take you back intact. What's the use of my brain? Where are you taking me back to? The Ark. No, there is no place on the Ark where ceremonies can be held. Wilson shook his head. Your brain should be placed inside the white coffin, not in this body that is about to be super eroded. The white coffin, is it the coffin that appeared inside Yagunactor? That's the black coffin. The black coffin symbolizes power, and the white coffin symbolizes wisdom. Power without wisdom control will only bring raging disasters and destroy everything. Wilson continued said, you were supposed to wake up in the white coffin and eat the fruits produced in the black coffin, but there was a deviation in the ceremony. You were not put into the white coffin, but were mixed into the symbiote's cultivation vessel. You mean, I'm not a symbiote? Ian's eyes twitched violently a few times. The amount of information contained in the other person's few words was enough to cause his brain to temporarily shut down. I couldn't help but feel a little suffocated. If Wilson hadn't lied, he was not a symbiote. Then what was he? White coffin, black coffin, what is the so-called ritual? Kaylan clearly thought that he had mastered a lot of truth, but now he found that all the truths he thought were overturned by the other party's words. It's impossible to tell whether Wilson's words are true or false, but one thing Kaylan is sure of is that the body in the black coffin has an inexplicable connection with him. Since the black coffin will be related to if he has a connection, then the opposite white coffin should also be the same. But, what exactly are this black coffin and white coffin? Why does it appear inside Yagonactor? Are these two coffins made by the undead crew, or do they originally exist in Yagonactor? What is their function? Kaylan sighed helplessly. Although he successfully joined the undead crew, the crew still hid too many things from themselves. Those core secrets were not revealed to Kaylan at all. What he knew, even not as much as the Wilson suffering from schizophrenia in front of me. What will happen if you put my brain in the white coffin? Kaylan asked tentatively. If you can tell me the result, it's not impossible for me to cooperate with you. The full name of the black coffin and the white coffin combined is called the Coffin of Eternal Life. It was not Wilson who answered Kaylan, but Nieto. You may be surprised why its name is related to those who used it to preserve it. It's the same as my own hibernation cabin. That's because the hibernation cabin they made is actually an inferior imitation of the Coffin of Immortality. How do you know these things? Kaylan asked in a deep voice. It is still unclear whether Nieto and Wilson are in the same camp. If the two sides join forces for some reasons, then for Kaylan, the situation is a bit not good. Because the Coffin of Eternal Life was originally made in the nest, and the person who made it tried to use it to fight against disasters. What kind of countermeasure? Like the undead crew would do, by sealing the body to delay the deepening of the erosion. No, I said, that's just an inferior imitation. True immortality should be, becoming a god himself. Become, a god. But this is blasphemy against the great gods, so there is no doubt that they failed, Nieto said with a sarcastic tone. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chenmi-san. Chapter 943. Since this is blasphemy against the great god, then why did you allow this guy to ambush me here? Don't tell me, you can't do anything against him. Kaylan pointed his gun at Wilson standing opposite and said. The great gods never care about the blasphemy of insects, Nieto said, and for me, if you can really use the power of the Coffin of Immortality to take a step in that direction, even if it is only half a step, it is a step. A good thing. Good thing. In order to offer better sacrifices to the great gods, Nieto replied. Look, this guy is only thinking about using me as a sacrifice to that bullshit god. I suggest you get rid of him first, and then we can sit down and talk slowly. Kaylan looked at Wilson again and suggested Road. My goal is only you, anything else has nothing to do with me. If the administrator of the Hive City is willing to provide me with some help, then I don't mind cooperating with them. Damn it, I'm afraid Nieto and Wilson have already reached some kind of tacit understanding. Kaylan cursed inwardly. It seems that there is no chance of sowing discord. We can only find a way to solve one of them first. Nieto's biggest limitation is that he has lost control of most of the nest. Apart from being able to change the weather patterns in the jungle hunting ground and implanting illusions into the invaders' brains through the power of the dome, he has not yet shown any ability to control the invaders' brains. Reality has the ability to interfere, but once a Wilson is added, the situation is completely different. Nieto can help Wilson to the greatest extent within his capabilities. Of these three items, the opponent suddenly has the right location, and both. As for Kaylan, the right time, and right people are not necessarily on his side. Give up your resistance, Wilson said to Kaylan. I can at least guarantee that I will take you back completely. What if I say no? I can only bring your brain back as completely as possible. The city under the sea. Although the hounds and others were very afraid of the illusion magnetic field, they still entered the interior of the undersea city. As the influence of the illusion magnetic field on people continues to deepen, we will observe more and more unreasonable things, Ghost Owl said to the other three people. Once you realize that you can't distinguish between reality and illusion, when you reach the boundary between them, it means you are very close to the dangerous line of being completely lost. Then how did you deal with situations like this before? Hound asked. Exit the ruins immediately. If it's too late, knock yourself out, Ghost Owl replied concisely. Knock yourself out, it's okay if it's a team action, but if it's a lone hunter, what's the difference between that and committing suicide? Chi Hanfan said in astonishment. There is still a difference, Hound continued, most of the mechanisms in the ruins are trigger type. If you really fall into an illusion and can't extricate yourself, running around will be far more dangerous than passing out. Being passed out will, at least you can also hope that you will be rescued by the subsequent hunters. If you run into those deadly traps in a crazy state, it may be difficult for your relatives to see your bones again. Okay, if I fall into an illusion, everything will be left to you. Chi Hanfan looked at the Hound and said. It's useless for you to tell me. You, me, and Ghost Owl, all three of us have experienced hallucinations to a certain extent. Only Zwilligito and Ziona have not had any abnormalities so far. If you ask me, the people who can persevere until the end, it must be the two of them, Hound pouted. That's not necessarily true. Ghost Owl shook his head. Although the influence of the illusion magnetic field is gradual, there are great differences between individuals. Some people have various small hallucinations along the way, but they never lose themselves, while some people who can't feel anything until they reach a certain depth, but when hallucinations start to appear, they will immediately indulge in it. This kind of example is not unheard of. I can probably understand the latter type of person you are talking about. They have very weak inspiration and slow brains, but their psychological defenses are extremely fragile. For this kind of person, the threshold for triggering inspiration is higher than that of ordinary people, but once it is triggered, even if just that kind of very low-level inspiration will also have a huge impact on his mind. The Hound nodded. This kind of person is actually not suitable to be a ruin hunter. In order to make a living, many people have no choice. Ghost Owl sighed. I once persuaded many newcomers who were not good enough in the training camp, but these newcomers turned around and joined other hunting groups. Only a few of them, only those who are lucky, can survive until retirement, and the rest are basically buried in the ruins. How's your inspiration? Asked the Hound. I'm not sure, but I have a keen sense of danger, Ghost Owl said truthfully. It's hard to say whether this is an ability or luck, but it is because of the sense of smell that I can survive until now. Kaylan is also a guy who is extremely sensitive to danger, and so is Asano Akira. People like them seem to be able to predict the future. It's a pity that they are not here now. Hound sighed. People like me are from the army. People who have retired can still fight well, but if you ask me to deal with something like this that cannot be understood with common sense, I really can't bear it. Then why do you still want to be a relic hunter? Ghost Owl glanced at the Hound, with a hint of surprise in his eyes. What you just said was forced by life. In the beginning, maybe it was because of the pressure to make a living, but later, the God hunting group has made a lot of money. You even just need to sit in the office and leave all the work to your subordinates to enjoy food and clothing. If you live a worry-free life, why would you put yourself in danger? Ghost Owl asked. You think our life is very comfortable. In fact, only we know that our heads are always tied to our belts, Hound said helplessly. That kid Kaylan has caused too many troubles, but we have to help him. Who asked him to save our lives? Besides, even the favorable conditions in your eyes were brought to us by him. Without him, I would still be miserable now. He is a lone hunter. Kaylan, what kind of person is he? Ghost Owl asked curiously. Although we have dealt with him several times, I have never been able to see through him. I always feel that there are many secrets hidden in him. Even if you have told me a lot, in my opinion, these secrets are just the tip of the iceberg. What we know, or what Kaylan knows, is only the tip of the iceberg. Otherwise, he wouldn't have gone to a place like the Grey Mist Forest where birds don't poop, and we wouldn't have been inexplicably trapped. The undead crew will be forced into this situation. Just when the Hound wanted to complain a few more words, Valentina's voice suddenly rang out. Major, Uncle Nick, I just noticed now that the water pressure outside is much lower than before. If you carry deep, if you wear a diving suit, you should be able to move out of the deep diving chamber. Water pressure, oh, I almost forgot about this. The Hound slapped his forehead suddenly. Kaylan only wore a deep diving suit when he explored this underwater city. Before entering the liquid cliff, withstanding the pressure was no problem at all. The depth of this place is simply not comparable to the underwater city with the pyramids we saw at the beginning. Chi Hanfan stood up immediately, pulled out a drawer-type container, took out 4 deep diving suits, handed them to everyone, and said, "This is the only life-saving diving suit for emergency use. It has no weapons or detection equipment, there is no self-powered propeller, and the only additional equipment is the 2 metal cans on the waist. The blue one is a broad-spectrum biological repellent. When thrown into the water, it can emit chemicals that are annoying to most aquatic indigenous creatures. Smell, the other red one is a smoke signal can, used to indicate the direction to rescue aircraft. The lack of weapons and thrusters is not a big problem. After all, we still have the blasphemer Mecha and Valentina." Hound took the deep diving suit and unzipped it. "I just want to know how this thing can work. How deep the water pressure can be withstood." I remember that Kaylan was wearing a military-grade tactical deep diving suit at that time. With the injectable pressurizer, the maximum diving depth should be 1,200 meters. I don't have pressurizing agent on hand. If I just rely on this diving suit, there should be no problem at a depth of 800 meters, Chi Hanfan said. He turned to look at the instrument panel inside the submersible, but the instrument panel had already been damaged, which simply cannot show the current depth. "Valentina, what's our depth now?" he asked. "I don't know either. The Mecha's depth gauge seems to be broken. The number keeps jumping between 0 and 10,000 without stopping." Same, the Hound nodded with deep understanding. When Kaylan first entered this area of water, all the detection equipment on his body also failed. In addition to the illusion magnetic field, there are probably other things in the sea area. An interfering magnetic field capable of affecting electronic equipment. Hiss, now we're in trouble. The problem is actually not difficult to solve. Didn't Ziona just say that the water pressure has dropped? This means that at least the water pressure can be monitored. We don't have to worry about the real depth of this place. As long as the water pressure is within the deep diving suit, we can go out as much as we can bear it. The water pressure is determined by the sensor on the surface of the Mecha. If converted, it is about a depth of about 400 to 500 meters, Valentina said immediately. "Okay then, let's go out." Hound put on the deep diving suit and locked all the airtight rings at the joints. "I don't want to stay in this broken iron ball anymore. If something unexpected happens, you won't be able to run away even if you want to. I have a suggestion." Ghost Owl also put on the deep diving suit and said, "I suggest that we divide into 2 teams. This can double the exploration efficiency in the same unit of time." 1 person from each team did not show up. Members who have experienced hallucinations serve as insurance. What do you think? No, Hound said without thinking. Have you ever seen those kind of sci-fi horror movies? Usually when the protagonist group wants to split up, it is basically announcing that people will die soon. Besides, the only reliable combat power at present is the blasphemer Mecha. What if the team without Mecha encounters some monster? What I mean is to search separately in a small area. For example, in each block, 1 team of people will search the east half, and another team will search the west half. After searching a block, we will meet again to exchange information and harvest, Ghost Owl said. If we don't divide our forces, our existing oxygen generators may not be able to support us in searching the entire undersea city. I still think what the old dog said makes sense. Zwilligito was the last person to put on the deep diving suit. He was relatively tall and wanted to put on the bulky deep diving suit in the narrow space inside the deep diving vehicle. It was quite difficult to dress up, and in the end I had to rely on Chi Hanfan's help to put it on. Split the troops. Although the exploration efficiency can be doubled, but it means that the probability of encountering an accident will also be doubled. not to mention the enlightenment of the three of you. It appears in three different forms. What if there is a puzzle that requires the information contained in the three revelations to be solved together? It's decided not to separate. Hound looked around, and after making sure that all four of them had put on their deep diving suits, he forcefully opened the safety valve on the hatch of the submersible. The sound of gurgling came from all around, and a large amount of seawater poured into the interior of the submersible through the reverse pressure relief valve, gradually covering the knees of the four people. This safety valve is used for emergency escape, and the hatch is closed before opening. The entire submersible will be filled with seawater to ensure that the pressure inside and outside the submersible is completely consistent. The filling process lasted for about 15 minutes. The Hound raised his wrist and glanced at the pressure gauge of the deep diving suit. The pointer was still 1/3 free from the red warning line, which meant that the water pressure increased by another %. 50, this deep diving suit can withstand it. The Hound made an OK gesture to the three of them, then opened the hatch and swam out. The three of them filed out behind him. Since there were no propellers, in order to prevent being swept away by the undercurrent, the four of them wore a safety rope around their waists in their deep diving suits, and the end of the safety rope was tied to on the wrist of the god's mecha. Although I have just observed this underwater city through the porthole window, when I actually stepped on the streets of this ruins with my feet, the feeling was completely different. Ghost Owl murmured, back then when the undersea city was discovered, I thought about organizing an exploration operation, but before the draft of the operation was completed, this sea area was closed. It's a good thing that you wrote the action draft slowly, otherwise you might regret it. Hound teased. Oh no, you might not even have a chance to regret it. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 944. Hive City, Upper City, Jungle Hunting Ground. Zeeluo, can you see where the weakness of this guy in front of you is, Zeeluo? Zeeluo. Kaylan called out to the three-no monster girl in his heart, but the other party didn't give any response, as if she was asleep. The black armor transformed by Zeeluo is still attached to K-Ian's body. But when Kaylan and Wilson fought just now, the black armor did not help him resist any attacks. Kaylan originally thought it was because of Zeeluo's ability. The reason for being imprisoned, but now it seems that Zeeluo may have more trouble than that. You don't have to call it, Nieto apparently sensed K-Ian's thoughts. A creature like this that uses his blood as its raw material simply doesn't dare to run wild in his kingdom. This is suppression from the source. Oh, I know, Kaylan said expressionlessly, then quickly pulled the trigger and shot Wilson's head off. Wilson's headless body suddenly froze, fell straight backwards, and hit the ground with a muffled sound. But the next second, the originally stiff corpse suddenly twitched, and every muscle under the skin was spasming and squirming. It seemed that something was gathering along the blood vessels of its body toward the neck. Soon, a large amount of blood foam began to pour out from the fracture in the neck. As soon as the blood foam came into contact with the air, it began to solidify and turned into tissues similar to muscles and fascia. You can't kill him. His ability is infinite regeneration. Even if you kill him to pieces, as long as there is one cell left that has not been completely destroyed, this cell will continue to divide and differentiate, just like a fertilized egg. It's the same, but it takes several months and a lot of nutrients for a fertilized egg to develop into an embryo, but it only takes a few hours to return to its original appearance. It can multiply indefinitely without nutrients, so, this thing is more powerful than cancer cells. If the crazy people at the research institute knew about it, they would probably regard this thing as a treasure, right? Kaylan couldn't help but he complained in his heart. Of course mortals can't understand his abilities. Nieto's voice sounded all around. This thing has been monitoring K-Ian's thinking. A lot of information related to the Ark was also read from Ian's memory. If there is an ability that Lan hates the most, it's probably this kind of mind-reading ability. The previous Pope Chiron also had similar abilities, but Chiron gained the mind-reading ability at the cost of becoming a corpse. Lan once thought that Chiron was in such a tragic situation because he failed to fuse with the living armor. But in fact, when Lan saw Chiron for the first time, Chiron was already in an irreversible state of decay. Nieto's abilities are very similar to Chiron's. No, Chiron's abilities should be very similar to Nieto's. After all, Nieto's existence was much earlier than Chiron's. Since you can hear the voice in my heart, you should know what I am going to do, right? Lan dug out an incendiary bomb from his backpack, quickly deactivated the fuse, and then completely disassembled the top part. Down. This is a special incendiary bomb jointly developed by the Weapons and Equipment R/U0026D Department of the Institute and the Military Industrial Enterprises under the SOMA Consortium. It is not filled with conventional napalm, but from an alpha star plant called Eternal Burning Mantle. The burning ability of this concentrated substance extracted from lava is even more terrifying than the secretion of lava canthacrillate. It only takes a piece the size of a fingernail to burn a person until no ashes are left, and a whole incendiary bomb is thrown out. Can even burn a thunder beast to death. You said that as long as one cell remains, this guy can be resurrected indefinitely. So if I smear this thing all over his body and then light it on fire, will he still be able to stand up from a pile of carbonized proteins? Yes, Nieto said firmly. You should know that in the old era, there were creatures like the phoenix in myths and stories all over the earth. In the east, it was called phoenix, and in the west, it was called phoenix. They can rise from the ashes and never die. Are you trying to tell me that this guy's real name is not Wilson, but Phoenix? Lan stared at the already grown head and said, Senbai's skull has been fully formed, and the bones have also been. The tendons and blood vessels are attached, and the two somewhat turbid eyeballs are squirming slightly in the orbits. When the external muscles and skin are fully grown, Wilson's head will return to the way it was before being shot by Lan. Phoenix is an ability, a name given by the people who once lived in this hive, Nieto replied, and it seemed to be happy to share this information with Lan. You already know, after the super eclipse, the eroded individuals will turn into various forms that are extremely weird in the eyes of humans. At the same time, according to their different mutated forms, they will also gain different abilities. Although there are many samples, people still try their best to summarize 100 among the other more representative mutant forms and abilities. The one you see now belongs to Ficnus, the undead who is infinitely reborn. Is he a corpse? Although Lan had such a guess, he had never been able to confirm it until now. Nieto told him, Wilson is Phoenix. His corrosion level has exceeded the critical point, but through some means, he has retained his sanity. Nieto said, as a possessor of the Phoenix ability, he cannot be killed by conventional means. Any part has the ability to be infinitely restored, so from the outside, as a corpse, he is no different from a non-mutated human being. It's interesting. Lan did not pour the charge in the incendiary bomb on Wilson, but held his chin and looked at Wilson as he thought, if he is a corroded corpse, he still remains. With a human appearance and a human mind, then isn't he the perfect evolution that the undead crewmen dream of? Both the undead crews and the Alpha civilization should be eager to gain the power of gods through corroding, but Eclipse. The biggest disadvantage of becoming a skeleton is that super eclipsed individuals will lose their minds and gradually be drained of life and soul by it, but the existence of Phoenix perfectly solves this problem. Lan continued, I don't understand why the undead crew would send such a perfect evolution to carry out such a dangerous mission. If I were them, I would definitely do my best to study Wilson's body structure and changes. If it can be reproduced, wouldn't that be the perfect evolution of all mankind that they want? Do you think no one has thought about it this way? Nieto sneered. The human beings who once lived on this planet were far more numerous than the population on your ark, and there were also many individuals who were eroded into corpses. Phoenix's existence, but Phoenix is not perfect, this is a gift from him. You wouldn't think that a despicable thief could defy his will by relying on that little gift that is insignificant to him, right? Phoenix's immortality is only relative. As long as he is willing, he can turn the phoenix into ashes at any time and never be reborn again. In other words, this guy has a time bomb hidden in his body that may explode at any time, and no one knows the countdown of this time bomb. Oh, let me put it another way, this is not a time bomb, but a remote control. The bomb, the remote control is in the hand of that god. Can you understand it that way? Kaylan raised the gun again, aimed at Wilson's head, and exploded his newly formed head again. Kaylan still has 4 bullets left, so he can kill Wilson 4 more times. Even if all the bullets are used up, the remaining engineer shovel can smash Wilson's head. Kaylan can always be in Wilson's state of rebirth. But could not kill him completely. What the remote control said is not entirely correct. He doesn't even bother to pay attention to such a small existence. Then how do you detonate the bomb in this guy's body? Kaylan weighed the engineer shovel in his hand, raised it high, and then slashed it down hard, cutting off one of Wilson's arms. Compared with the corroded corpses that Kaylan had encountered before, Wilson's physical strength was not very high. It was about the same as ordinary people. He probably spent all his skill points on rebirth and recovery, and had no extra points to spend on other things. Attribute: no wonder Wilson used modern technological means when he ambushed Kaylan. With his own combat power, it is difficult to pose any threat to Kaylan. But an enemy that cannot be killed is enough to haunt people. What's more, Nieto and Wilson have become temporary allies. What Nieto needs is not an ally with strong combat power, but a chess piece that can complete some operations for it that it cannot complete. Kaylan brings endless trouble. If you want to deal with Nieto, you have to deal with Wilson. But even if Wilson is chopped into pieces, burned to ashes, and buried in a deep pit, it won't take long for him to crawl out intact, unless that bullshit god suddenly has a whim and takes back the creature named Phoenix ability. I don't know, Nieto said, that is the power of the great gods, I can't figure it out. Even if you knew, you wouldn't tell me. Kaylan curled his lips and spat on Wilson. After all, I am your enemy, and he is your ally, even if it is temporary sexual allies. No, you are not my enemy. We can definitely become friends, as long as you are willing to embrace the grace of the great God. We will not only become friends, but we will eventually become one, regardless of each other, and become part of the great God. This is the most perfect ending for a biological individual, Nieto said. Its tone was like those of devout believers in heretical sects, which made Kaylan feel disgusted. Is it such an honor to be eaten as food? Then what is the difference between you and the meat animals in the farm? Kaylan suddenly paused in the middle of his words. As if he thought of something, he repeated a few words in his previous sentence: eat it as nourishment. What are you going to do? Nieto's tone showed a subtle change. It was obvious that he was spying on Ian's inner thoughts at this time. I can't kill Phoenix, but I can eat Phoenix. If you have the ability, he can try to be reborn in my body. As soon as Kaylan finished speaking, the living armor on his body suddenly shot out countless spikes, covering him like a sea urchin. These spikes penetrated Wilson's body and lifted it into the air. Wilson's originally plump and strong body quickly shriveled up, while the blood-red living armor became very bright, looking like the painted surface of a luxury sports car. This guy seems to be a great supplement to living armor, Kaylan said with emotion. In just 10 seconds, the existence of Wilson was completely eliminated from this world, along with his ability of infinite rebirth, and the power of the living armor increased hundreds of times. It is no exaggeration to say, now Kaylan can directly use the living armor to condense a big thing like a blasphemer mecha. There's even some energy left. The sporadic nutrients fed back to K-Lan by the living armor allowed K-Lan to directly break through the limit that no one had ever broken through on the Ark, at least according to the official data, and climb to about 13 levels of enhancement in one fell swoop. Human level. Tisk, tisk, I didn't expect this to be a Shequan Dabu pill. K-Lan took back the living armor and looked around. Not only was Wilson's body completely absorbed, even the blood and minced meat K-Lan that had just been splashed out did not fall. All the ground within a radius of 100 meters was turned over by the tentacles condensed from the living armor, and even those stained the bloody bark was ripped off by the living armor and swallowed alive. No. Impossible. For the first time, there was a hint of fear in Nieto's voice. Phoenix can't be eaten. For other individuals, even those that have been transformed into corpses, it can't be eaten, it can't be swallowed, it's not a Shequan Dabu pill at all, it should be extremely poisonous. If you swallowed Phoenix, your corrosion level should be directly off the charts. Why are you still no super eclipse? I don't know either. K-Lan replied to him what Nieto had just said, maybe I'm special? It's probably for this reason that the Undead Crew Association values me so much. It's a pity that I have my own will, and I don't want to be a puppet like Wilson and be at their mercy. No. No. You are not human at all, you are a corpse. You have been a corpse for a long time, Nieto shouted at the top of his lungs. P.S. Thanks for the 400 starting coins rewarded by the opponent who doesn't know what it is. Alien Relic Hunter author, and Chenmi-san. Chapter 945. I'm erosion. K-Lan himself was stunned. Then why is my consciousness always awake? Isn't this a unique trait of Phoenix? K-Lan thought of his perverted recovery ability and couldn't help but murmured, am I the same as Wilson, the owner of the Phoenix ability? You are not Phoenix at all. Although Phoenix can be reborn infinitely, it is absolutely impossible to swallow another Phoenix. Swallow, the ability to swallow, I know, you are a Dowdy. Only with the ability of Dowdy only the corpses of the corpses can devour other corpses without suffering backlash. No, that's not right. The impact of the Dowdy ability on an individual's mind is the most serious. If you are a Dowdy, you should be completely trapped. Crazy, what on earth are you? Nieto's thinking seemed to be in chaos, and even the weather in the jungle hunting ground changed drastically. It was still freezing cold just a second ago. The next second, he jumped to a large furnace of 50 degrees Celsius. The snowflakes falling from above melted in mid-air and turned into a downpour before they even hit the ground. K-Lan didn't dwell too much on this matter. Taking advantage of Nieto's inability to restrain himself at this time, he immediately accelerated his pace, passed through the central area of the jungle hunting ground, and ran towards the western half of the area. He had many questions to ask Nieto, but instead of communicating with the other party in the area controlled by the other party, K-Lan preferred to put the weapon against the other party's head and negotiate terms. The rain in the forest did not stop. Instead, it became heavier and heavier. The ground became very muddy and slippery, and large swamps even formed in some low-lying places. The mutants who were raised in the jungle hunting ground seemed to have gone crazy and rushed towards K-Ian's direction without fear of death. Fortunately, after devouring Wilson's body, K-Ian's personal strength had a huge breakthrough. These mutants basically killed each other instantly. Only two mutants of the same level as the crocodile monster slightly slowed down K-Lan for a few minutes. Are you afraid? Do you want to use these monsters to stop me? K-Lan asked loudly as he ran. Although the mutants in the jungle hunting ground are ferocious in nature, they are actually very smart. Under normal circumstances, they would never do such a thing as seeking death, but now K-Ian's route is covered with the corpses of mutants. But there are still mutants jumping out of every corner, ranging from giant pythons hundreds of meters long to flying insects as small as fingernails, all blocking K-Ian's path, even if they are killed in the next second. He is not afraid of being split in half by K-Lan. I injected the madness potion with your pheromones into all the creatures in the hunting ground. Before the effect of the madness potion wears off, they will do everything they can to kill you." Nieto murmured, "Monsters like you should not exist, you are a mistake, an alien that is not allowed to be created. I will carry out divine punishment on his behalf and completely erase you from this world." "What? Now you don't want me to merge with that bullshit god of yours?" Kaylan asked curiously. This time, Nieto did not answer his question. Instead, the mutants' offensive became more intense. Many mutants actually only had half their lives left when they rushed up. Their eyes, noses, ear canals, and mouths were full of blood, and their bodies were sore and rotten that they would even break into pieces as they ran. Their muscles and internal organs fell off. Even if Kaylan didn't kill them, I'm afraid these mutants wouldn't be able to survive until the effect of the madness potion ends. In addition to making these mutants lose their minds and only focus on Kaylan, the effect of the madness potion can also act as a strengthening agent. However, this strengthening agent has extremely side effects and overdraws the user's life. As a price, the stronger the vitality that can be overdrawn, the more significant the amplification effect that the potion can provide. Some weak mutants fell to the ground and died suddenly before they could even reach Kaylan after being injected with the madness potion. As for the weaker ones, they probably died immediately after the injection, and even their potential was reduced. There is no way to break out. In contrast, the battlefield stimulants developed by the ARC Research Institute are not like this. They are also at the expense of overdrafting vitality. The Research Institute once provided a drug called Hell Lava, trial type, to some special forces of the Field Corps. The drug can stimulate the human body's potential to the greatest extent after being taken. After the effect of the drug ends, even if the user does not die on the spot due to the sudden outbreak of accumulated injuries, it is difficult for the user to return to the rear alive for treatment. Even if a completely healthy person takes this drug for experimental purposes and enters the medical cabin immediately after taking it, his internal organs will suffer irreversible failure within a few hours. Unless all internal organs are replaced, death will still be inevitable. Destiny. But this medicine has a characteristic. Before the effect of the medicine ends, it can hang the user's life, as long as it is not a decapitation injury. Even if the heart is pierced, it can still allow the user to continue fighting for a period of time. It's a bit like the blood lock function in game plugins. It is said that in the 2 years before ARC landed on Alpha Planet, this trial production potion without official number was mass-produced and distributed to the front-line troops. At that time, on such a desperate battlefield, the usage rate of this medicine is also quite high. Rather than being silently swallowed up by the tide of beasts, it is better to give it a last try and completely burn out your life in the most glorious way. This was the idea of the vast majority of soldiers who used these potions back then. Later, after the situation stabilized, the production of this potion was ordered to stop because it was inhumane, and all inventories were destroyed. It is said that even the formula was sealed, but Kaylan later learned about this after joining the Undead Crew Club. In fact, all the potions are being produced, they just have a different name. Hell Lava can allow an ordinary soldier to gain the power of a 5th level enhanced person in a short period of time. According to various paper data, the increase rate is about 1.3 to 1.5 times, and the maddening medicine that Nieto injected into these mutants had an increase rate of 2 to 3 times. To give a simple and easy to understand example, a person can originally punch with a force of 500 kilograms with all his strength. After injecting this medicine, the force of a punch can be increased to 1 to 1.5 tons. This is no longer through hard work. The level of improvement that can be achieved through exercise, without relying on strengthening, reconstructive surgery, or external objects such as mechanical skeletons, a lifetime of training will not reach this level of increase. Several Epsilon-level mutants have already made Kaylan feel a little bit in trouble. The only thing that makes him a little lucky is that these mutants are strong, but they don't have as high defense as the crocodile. Klan, I would rather face this kind of monster with high attack and low defense than an iron turtle that can't be killed in a long fight. But just when Klan was about to rush out of the jungle hunting area, he was stopped by an extremely powerful mutant. To be precise, this is not a pure mutant, but a Stitch monster formed by the combination of humans and various mutants. A monster has a human head, a chimpanzee body, the claws of an unknown beast, and a long and powerful scorpion tail. The neck, chest, and joints are also covered with crystallized scales. The legs should be from some kind of giant crawler. A humanoid creature, probably an extinct dinosaur on Earth, with its back covered with exposed sharp bone spurs. Logically speaking, this kind of monster would only appear in chaotic and frightening nightmares, not the real world. This kind of mutant shouldn't have evolved naturally, right? Klan shook the engineer shovel in his hand and took a deep breath. The monster in front of him gave him a strong sense of crisis, something that none of the previous mutants had ever experienced. This meant that the Stitch monster was stronger than the Epsilon-level mutants. Several levels. You should know that in the eyes of people in the upper city area of the hive capital, people from the lower hive are never treated as human beings, Nieto said slowly. I know. In their eyes, the underhive people are just like the mutants in this hunting ground. They are wild beasts and livestock. Beasts and livestock can be used as prey, and the underhive people can also be used as prey, and wild beasts and livestock can, of course. The people from the bottom nest can carry out mutations and transformations at will. There was a well-known biologist in Uptown at that time. His name has been deleted from my database, but I still remember his deeds. He created many classic mutants and transformed the nest into the hunting competition in the city has reached one peak after another. When the residents of the upper city had grown tired of those mutants, he turned his attention to the bottom prey who were selected to participate in the hunting competition. On the body, Nieto continued, he selected many people from the underhive, and even for the success rate of the experiment, even the healthy residents of the lower city were forced to become his experimental materials. He created many fusions of humans and beasts. These mutants have a unified name called Chimera. At first, he restored the races in myths and legends, such as combining the genes of wolves and humans, or combining the genes of bats and humans. Combination, but without exception, all experiments failed. Experimental subjects transplanted with animal organs all showed strong rejection reactions, and embryos that had undergone gene editing could only grow into an irregular and ugly mass of flesh. Just when this biologist was at the end of his rope, disaster struck, and the only successful work in his life is now in front of you, the number 1 Lambda-level mutant, Sphinx. Lambda-level, Klan suddenly became wary after hearing this word. The iron crocodile he killed before was only an Epsilon level, a 5th level mutant, and the memory fragments. The highest level mutant successfully cultivated in the hive is the 8th level Theta level. As for this Lambda level, Lambda ranks 11th in the Greek alphabet. Not to mention that the monster named Sphinx in front of him has been injected with the kind of madness potion that can triple the combat power, so its actual combat power has probably exceeded the 12th level of mu-m. What worries Klan the most is, the Sphinx has a human head. We are not afraid of monsters having power, but we are afraid of monsters having intelligence. This is a saying recognized by all the pioneers and mercenaries who are wandering in the wilderness. No matter how powerful the monster is, relying on human wisdom, we can always find a way to eliminate it, and monsters with IQs similar to humans are the most troublesome existences. The Sphinx first came from the ancient Egyptian mythology of the earth. Its image is the Sphinx standing next to the Pyramid of Khufu. The Sphinx has also appeared in ancient Greek and West Asian mythology. Although there are differences in the Sphinxes in various myths, but they are basically monsters formed by a combination of humans, lions, bulls, and eagles. In these mythological stories, the Sphinx has a very high IQ. The most famous story is the Sphinx's guessing game. It sits on the cliff and asks everyone passing by to guess riddles. The wrong person will be eaten by it. Although this is just a legend, it undoubtedly illustrates one point: the Sphinx is as intelligent as humans. Your name is Sphinx, right? Kaylan glanced at the monster about 30 meters away from him and said. The Sphinx's upper body was slightly bent, and its head was thrust forward. Its eyes were fixed on Kaylan, its nasal cavity was greatly expanded, and its strong breath was continuously exhaled. Its throat kept crawling, making some meaningless low sounds. The sharp claws of its hands rubbed back and forth. The squeaking sound was like nails scraping against a blackboard, making people feel numb in the scalp. The Sphinx did not respond to Ian's words, but slowly approached Kaylan. You want to kill me because you were injected with a medicine containing my pheromones by the AI that controls this area, but you have a human brain. You are not a beast. You should be able to control that instinct with reason. Kaylan had to speak faster. I shouldn't be your enemy. Those who created you and brought you pain should be your enemies. It's useless. Nieto's voice rang out. You can't persuade the Sphinx. The Sphinx voluntarily accepted the transformation. Volunteer. He is not an under-hive person, but a resident of the Uptown District. He was first eroded by the disaster, and then he underwent the Chimera transformation surgery. He is the biologist himself.